Honourable colleagues, I'm here today to give my full support to Bill C-355, an act to prohibit the export by air of horses for slaughter and to make related amendments to certain acts. As of now, the regulations for air transportation of horses are the same, identical, whether those horses are raised to win medals or to provide food, whether those horses are raised for the Queen's plate or the food plate. The rules are supposed to be the same. But, and it's a big fat but, the horses that are raised in Canada and sent halfway around the world for slaughter, in practice, do not get the same ride on the plane as the other horses. Dr. Mary Jane Ireland, the Chief Veterinary Officer at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, said in committee that regulatory requirements were updated in 2019 and that the goal of the amendments was to provide avoidable suffering. Once again, the goal of the amendments was to prevent avoidable suffering of animals throughout the transport process by setting out the conditions for humanely transporting all animals by all modes of transport. That's the law. The regulatory requirements stated that the transport time of horses had to be less than 28 hours. The regulation does not require that the horses are fed or given water or provide enough space to lie down to rest during this time. No food, no water, no rest for 28 hours. According to Caitlin Mitchell from Animal Justice, recent scientific research shows that even very brief road trips of 3 or more hours can affect horses' endocrine and immune functions. They hurt horses. 3 hours, never mind 28. If you consider the journey of these gentle, majestic, sentient beings from the feedlots where they're raised into trucks for ground transport for several hours, to airports, to being pulled out of those trucks, in some cases prodded after they're pulled out of those trucks and put into wooden crates to sit on a noisy airport tarmac for a period of time, to then be put on a cargo plane to endure a long flight, all without food, water, or rest, it's entirely reasonable to believe there is a high probability these horses will suffer or sustain an injury during this process, or worse. Injury or worse. A lot of dead horses. Not to mention that we have no way of knowing how long it will take before these horses are able to drink, eat, and rest when they do arrive at their destination. In the study of this bill in the House of Commons, our fellow legislators were told there have been 5 horse deaths since 2013, and no significant injuries reported during the transport of 47,000 horses overseas to be slaughtered. Given the testimony of Dr. Mary Jane Ireland at the Agriculture and Agri-Food Committee, we have reason to seriously question these numbers. Dr. Ireland explained to the committee that the role of the Canadian inspectors during the transport of the horses, and I'm quoting, "The inspectors and veterinarians are at the airport when the animals are offloaded from the trucks, put into the containers, and put onto a plane to make sure they're fit to travel. They're healthy, it's not overcrowded, and they're compatible." This is her quote. But once the doors are closed in Canada and the plane is in the air, Canada, the department that is responsible, has absolutely no way of knowing what happens to those horses. Canadian inspectors are not present on the flights or on the ground when those horses arrive at their destination. So Canada relies entirely on local authorities overseas to tell us if there was a death or an injury during transportation. Canadian authorities have no way to verify or control the information received. And so the number of deaths and injuries could be dramatically different from what the CFIA reports. All we have is the so-called expectation that the local authorities overseas will be providing us with the truth. But there is no enforcement or reporting mechanisms in place. A recent report released in September by Animal Justice based on documents Japan-based animal rights group Life Investigation Agency obtained from the Japanese government suggests the numbers of deaths and injuries are exponentially higher than the numbers reported to the committee. The report states that horses exported from Canada to Japan for slaughter are frequently injured and killed due to the perilous nature of the journey. It states, and this is based on information from the Japanese government, it states at least 21 horses shipped from Canada to Japan for slaughter between June 23 and May 2024, which means less than 1 year. 21 horses shipped from Canada to Japan during that time frame alone died during transport or in the hours and days that followed. Many more suffered painful injuries and health complications. Example, fever, prolonged diarrhea, which appear to have been caused by the transport process. After arriving in Japan, horses exported for slaughter are dying of dehydration, stress, pneumonia, other medical conditions. Some of the pregnant mares are having painful miscarriages. Japanese government data even shows that some of those mares died after arrival due to those painful miscarriages. The data also shows a troubling pattern of inadequate veterinary care and monitoring during transport and after the horse's arrival in Japan. Unquote. Source is the Flight to Fatality, Animal Justice, September 2024. But once again, these numbers are based on data from the Japanese government. So there's no mystery here on the question, why is the practice of transporting live horses for slaughter no longer allowed or is in the process of being ended in many countries that we think of as democracies similar to our own? So I'm talking about the United States, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and others taking action to put an end to this practice. And Canadians are asking us to please do the same in this hallowed chamber of democracy. We can do the right thing simply by adopting C-355. As I speak today, if I may be permitted to be somewhat personal, the memory of someone very dear to my heart is on my mind. Her name is Sharon. She was not only a good friend to me, but more importantly to animals, many of them horses. There is zero doubt that she would be among the many thousands of Canadians who have signed petitions, emailed members of Parliament and senators like ourselves, calling for an end to this disgrace, an end to the exporting by air of live horses for slaughter. Every day in this life, we have a choice to be less human or more human. And that's the choice this chamber is facing tonight, more human or less human. I'm hoping this chamber chooses more. Let's send this bill to committee as soon as possible. C-355 has been in the Senate since May 21st. 5 senators and myself have spoken at second reading. I hope you'll join me in adopting the second reading of this bill and sending it to committee before the Senate rises for the holidays. I thank all of you for listening to me speak about this bill, and when passed, we're hoping it will ease the suffering of thousands of horses. Thank you. Merci. Miigwech.